You will often hear that the university's approach to sexual and gender-based violence, or SGBV, is survivor-driven. But what does that mean? Why is it important? And how does it work? The terms survivor-driven, survivor-led, or survivor-centered are all ways of describing an approach which recognizes that survivors can be affected by SGBV in ways well beyond the immediate impacts of an incident, that trauma can have lasting and cascading consequences on an individual's ability to fully participate in the learning environment, and that because individuals experience trauma in different ways, they are the experts in the needs that arose out of the harm they experienced. One of our commitments in the sexual and gender-based violence policy to those who have been subjected to SGBV is that, as much as possible, disclosures will be considered the primary decision makers in matters pertaining to themselves. As such, they can determine whether, to whom, and what to disclose, choose from a range of options, decide whether to make a complaint within the university, and determine the extent of their participation in any university process. In addition, disclosures may choose to make a complaint to an external law enforcement agency, professional regulatory body, or engage in any civil legal process. Note that the survivor-driven approach means that the survivor chooses for themselves, but not for anyone else. In other words, this approach does not give a survivor control over, for example, actions that the university may take. We'll talk more about this later. One of the factors aggravating the experience of trauma is a lack of control over the situation, and even over one's own reactions in the moment. So if sexual violence takes control away, the university's response should not do the same. Healing from trauma and preventing PTSD requires voice and choice for survivors. We want to make sure that survivors are able to talk to someone about their experience to help them process it, and they have the freedom to choose from a range of options about what to do next without pressure. We also have to acknowledge that we can cause additional unnecessary harm if we don't believe or we minimize a survivor's experience. We force, coerce, or otherwise steer the survivor towards specific action without consideration for their needs and capacities. At the University of Alberta, we offer a range of options available to those who disclose having been subjected to SGBV, including modifications, interim measures, safety planning, personal support, medical support, making a complaint, or doing nothing. Knowing that needs can change over time, we don't require survivors to lock in and commit to only one option. They may need modifications in the short term, but seek an educational, non-disciplinary resolution later. There may be times when they choose an option but need to pause when their capacity to participate is overtaxed. We offer the flexibility to choose one or more options at any time. The goal is to ensure that an experience of SGBV and its consequences to the survivor don't stand in the way of that individual's full and equitable participation in their campus activities. Finally, we want to ensure that support is available, no matter what choices the survivor decides are best for them. It's important to note the limits to what is driven by a survivor. As already discussed, the survivor can make their own choices about what they do, who they tell, and how they participate or don't participate in a university process. However, this does not relieve the university of its responsibilities. In addition to addressing the needs of an individual survivor, the university is responsible for the safety of the community and to provide a safe, supportive, and vibrant learning environment. And remember that the learning environment includes all spaces, virtual or real, activities and functions related to the university, including the workplace. Many survivors have indicated that some of their choices were not made in their own best interests, but because they felt responsible to prevent SGBV against others in the future. That is a heavy responsibility, and one that actually rests with the university. So while the survivor can make decisions pertaining to themselves and their own participation, The university will, in some cases, initiate corrective actions on its own volition, with or without the survivor's participation. These corrective actions might relate to a person. For example, the university might apply interim measures or initiate an investigation into a person's behavior, effectively becoming the complainant in a process. On the other hand, the corrective actions could relate to the learning environment or the conditions which might have been conducive to or given rise to SGBV. A review of the environment might reveal, for example, that the policy is not well understood, or that bystanders don't feel empowered to speak up, or that sexist or homophobic humor is common. In these cases, communications, training, education, and other measures to improve the conditions are necessary. And where this is the approach, names or details of any specific incident are unnecessary. The idea is to change the conditions so that the environment is no longer conducive to SGBV. Or the university could decide that both a policy investigation into an individual's misconduct and a cultural reset are necessary. For the university, the goal is twofold. We aim to acknowledge that a survivor is the expert in their own healing and to respect their choices for themselves. And at the same time, we must be responsible for providing that safe, supportive, and vibrant learning environment. It's also important to understand that where the SGBV policy is in conflict with a collective agreement, the collective agreement takes precedence. In the segment on intersectionality, you'll learn why this approach is especially important as an intersectional measure as well. A survivor-driven approach is intersectional, in that it allows the survivor to make decisions based on their own experience of barriers and challenges, and not based on what a standard understanding of how survivors are affected by SGBV and their subsequent interactions.